we'll go ahead and get started regardless. So my name is Jason Hunter. I've been a registered dietitian for over 20 years now. And I'm going to start bringing you some of these educational videos that help, I guess, inform the public, right? Inform you of what we currently know regarding the nutrients that we have available to us and the science and data that's behind them that might be able to help us get through this virus, right? Give us a fighting chances, as I like to call it, right? Um, we hear so much about wear a mask, social distance, and we never see our appointed experts that are in the news every night from the local level, your local health department or national, really pushing the issue of, hey, yes, you need to wear your mask, and yes, you need to social isolate, but here are some other things that science is telling us right now, or told us in the last 8 months, in regards to minimizing our risk of getting infected, right? Or reducing the symptoms we have if we do get infected. Because all we hear about now is obviously hospitals are overrun and doctors and nurses are tired. More people are dying. Keep wearing your mask. Okay, well, not to say masks aren't helping, but if they were the only thing we had to do, we wouldn't have this issue, right? So there's other things that researchers are finding that can help us reduce this risk, right? And there's some pretty big stuff on vitamin D. And I'm really frustrated with the fact that these appointed health experts aren't spreading this information. So I'm going to attempt to bring it to you. Hopefully you share it if you like it, and people can start doing, instead of one or two little things, they can start doing 10 little things, right? That turn into something big and really help reduce the infection rate, obviously ultimately deaths and so forth. So, I posted a post the other day, and this is kind of where this idea came from, was I asked, is this whole emergency use authorization and the definition of what it is in regards to how they can push a vaccine through so fast, could that be the reason why we're not seeing the research as much for vitamin D or zinc or Epicor or things like that, right? And if you talk to your doctor or your nurse at your doctor's office, they're all preaching it. Hey, it makes a big difference, this and that, right? But we don't ever see that in the mainstream media where most people are getting their information, right? I mean, unless I'm sick, I don't call up my doctor just to talk or ask questions, right? So I wouldn't hear it from my doctor unless I actually got sick. And that's when most people are hearing it, is after they're getting sick. And my question was, why are we not hearing more about this stuff in the news? Why is our local medical expert that's on the news every single night giving us a COVID update, why is he not saying, hey, besides wearing your mask and social isolating, do this, right? And some people were, with me, they agreed. Other people told me I was being ignorant for making such a post, right? I mean, heck, why should I not ask a question, to better my own health, right? That's just, yeah, I'm ignorant, I guess. So that's all right. I have thick skin. Doesn't really bother me. But, there's a frustration level there. So I've decided, you know what, I'm just going to start sharing some of the studies that come out. That way you're informed, you're educated, and then you can make the decision that's best for you. Whatever you decide you want to do at that point is up to you. But at least you have the information to go ahead and make that informed decision. So tonight we're going to talk about vitamin D. And I still can't get my stupid comments to show up, so that's annoying. So I'm going to have to, at least at the end, maybe go back and look and see if we have comments from people that when I'm doing this, because I'm not doing it from my phone, so I'm wondering if that's why I'm not seeing these comments and so forth. But so we're going to get started with the vitamin D. So there's lots of studies currently being conducted on a lot of nutrients. Obviously, we know there's studies being done and this whole vaccine protocol and whatnot, right? With any research, things are always moving, especially when it's new. So most of this stuff has come out in the last 8 months or so, right? 11 months, or roughly 10 months. So, there's moving targets, right? But indicators are showing us that scientists may be onto something with vitamin D. And I'm going to make a disclaimer right now. I'm not saying, hey, we don't have to take vaccines, or, we're not going to get on the topic of if you should take the vaccine or not, or if it's effective or not. Those are going to be topics for another day, right? Today, we're going to talk about vitamin D. So I want to be clear that don't twist what I'm trying to say here. What I'm presenting tonight is something that you can add to what you're currently doing and have that informed decision on, is it going to help protect me or my family? So, there's a lot of factors that can complicate a person's health, right? There's, especially when it comes to this COVID, there's diabetes, there's being overweight or obese, even your blood type. There's indications that certain blood types may be at a higher risk for severe symptoms, right? So we understand all that. But, if these nutrients can even help 5%, what would that do to our hospitals, right? What would that look like with our death rate, our infection rate? And what I'm going to show you in a little bit is a few studies that show vitamin D is a much higher likelihood that it can help than 5%. But, let's just say for argument's sake that it's just a little bit. Well, we're infecting, there's millions being infected. There's hundreds of thousands dying, right? 5% makes a big deal, right? So, think about it like that. Think about the impact that even a small percentage could have if we talked about these nutrients and the studies that are actually coming out and what they may or may not do for us, right? So we know vitamin D is an ACE2 inhibitor. And what that means is it blocks this ACE2 receptor. Well, we also know with COVID that ACE2 receptor is very important in it getting into our cells and replicating, right? So if we can block that receptor, the likelihood that coronavirus doesn't actually replicate in the body and just dies off, or you fight it off essentially, is a big deal. And that's why researchers are so interested in studying vitamin D right now, because they want to know, can it block to some extent this virus from entering our body and replicating, right? So I'm going to go over a few studies here, and that way you can, continue to research more, but you can make your own decision on this. There's a study out of Italy, and they saw that having low serum vitamin D levels was actually an independent risk factor for having symptomatic COVID-19 with respiratory distress that would require an ICU admission, compared to those that actually had adequate vitamin D levels that had mild COVID-19 symptoms. So I'm going to read you some of this here. They were given vitamin D in the hospital. Those that were given that vitamin D only had a small percentage of them to go to the ICU, like 2 to 3% or something like that. Those who weren't given vitamin D, almost half of them ended up being in the ICU. 8% of those who did not take that vitamin D ended up dying, and there were 0 deaths with those who took vitamin D. And that was in a study out of Italy. Italy's well known for their medical system. I mean, they're one of the most well-respected medical systems in the world, right? So it's not like this was a third world country or somewhere where they didn't have the money or the resources or the knowledge to be able to help these patients, right? But this is what they were finding in the beginning stages of trying to figure all this out. This is what they discovered. So there was another study led by a Northwestern University research team and a guy, Backman. They looked at statistical analysis of data from hospitals and clinics across China, France, Germany, Italy, Iran, South Korea, Spain, Switzerland, the United Kingdom, and the United States. So like 10 countries there, right? Right? 10, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Yeah, 10. The researchers noted that the patients from countries with high COVID-19 mortality rates, such as Italy and Spain and the UK, had lower levels of vitamin D compared to patients in countries that were not severely as affected. So, they analyzed the publicly available patient data from around the globe, and they discovered that there was a strong correlation between vitamin D and what's called cytokine storm. And you might have heard of that in the very beginning. It's a hyperinflammatory condition that really goes after the lungs because it's caused by an overactive immune system. It can severely damage it. It can lead to what they call acute respiratory distress, which then eventually leads to death, usually. A guy named Danish Ka, I think that's how you pronounce it. I'm probably butchering his name, so I apologize for that. In this study, he talked about, this is what seems to kill a majority of the COVID-19 patients. It's not the destruction of the lungs by the virus itself, but it's the complications from the misdirected fire from the immune system. And this is where Backman, one of the leading researchers of the Northwestern University group, he believed vitamin D plays a major role, and not only does it enhance our innate immune systems, it prevents our immune system from becoming dangerously overactive, which would create that cytokine storm, right? So it can prevent them from having severe complications. He also did say it may not prevent a patient from contracting the virus, but what they found was it can reduce complications and prevent death in those who are infected. So, like, this is the type of information that, why are we not talking about this in the mainstream media? We don't have to say, hey, take vitamin D and, you don't have to worry about anything, right? We're still going to be conscious about it. We're still going to be honest and say, here's what the science is currently telling us. It does indicate, especially since you can go on PubMed now and find dozens of studies on vitamin D related to COVID, that there's something there. So inform the public, inform people, share this video, right? So that people can actually make that informed decision on, should I be taking more vitamin D? And I'm going to have some other studies here to talk about that kind of even reinforces this data that's coming out in regards to what we can do to help give ourselves a fighting chance. And that's what I've been saying is, give yourself a fighting chance. Instead of just relying on this mask right here, right? And that's all you think you need. Well, again, not to say that it's not helping, but it's definitely not the solution, because we wouldn't have the cases we're having right now with the number of people wearing masks if it was the solution, right? So we need to do additional things. We need to add other tools to our toolbox so that we can give ourselves a better chance at fighting this virus off. So listen to this statement from Michael Holick. He's a MD and PhD out of Boston University School of Medicine. This study that they conducted at their university here, he says it provides direct evidence that vitamin D deficiency, let me start that over. It's vitamin D deficiency can actually reduce the complications, including a cytostorm, and ultimately death from COVID. So what they did was they researched hospitalized patients with severe COVID-19 in Iran. And this findings also came on the heels of another recently published study in which Holick and his team found that people with sufficient vitamin D levels in the United States had as much as a 54% reduced risk of getting infected with COVID-19. So when you think about that, let's just say that can't be replicated, right? And it's only half of that, that they can replicate, right? That's huge news, right? So why are our appointed health experts not talking about that? Why the people that have been assigned to give us updates every single day in the news, whether it's from the national level or local, why are they not talking about, hey, this is obviously emerging science, it can change, but what we're seeing right now is this potential reduced risk. And, go ahead and increase your vitamin D. Go get your blood tested and see where you're at. Because almost 40% of the US population, from some reports, are deficient in vitamin D right now. So if that's that big of an issue, why are we not talking about that? Right? We're not saying that, hey, it prevents it or it stops it or it cures it or anything like that, right? But with this science and something that comes out that says it may reduce risk by 54%, we should pay attention to it. The public should actually know about it so that, again, they can make their own decision on what they want to do, right? Imagine what our hospitals would look like if we had 54% less infection rate. Obviously, look at our death rate. What would that do, right? And again, even if we can't replicate that 54%, what if it's 30%? What if it's only 20% that can be replicated in study after study, right? That's still hundreds of thousands of people. That could be huge game changers for our economy. I mean, I just saw in the news something about 11,000 restaurants or something like that have already closed this year and are probably closed for good. Like, this is damaging, right? So again, if we believe in some tools, we should also know about the other tools that can help us fight this and help get over this quicker with hopefully less risk of severe symptoms and ultimately live instead of dying, right? We need to be spreading this information. So again, if you're liking this so far, please share this so that we can inform as many people as possible so that they can make the decision that they want to make for themselves, as long as they have obviously the information presented to them, right? There's another quote from this actual study here. There is biological plausibility for benefit of vitamin D, since it is known to regulate innate and adaptive immunities in ways that might reduce the viral load in patients exposed to SARS-CoV-2 and mitigate the severity and consequence of cytokine storm. So again, we know science changes, right? We know it's emerging, but there's numerous studies that are showing the benefits of vitamin D, and we need to be talking about it. We need to be letting the public know that this is possible. All we're asking is, share this, right? So that, again, people can make that informed decision and that they think's best for their health, right? As new data comes out, present the data. Hey, that 54% study, well, they replicated it. It's only 30% or 35, right? Okay, that's still a benefit, right? We're still helping people fight this thing. So, to me, it's a big deal. Hopefully it is to you. And I was just talking to a friend of mine on Monday. He's getting a surgical procedure done next week. So he had to get a routine COVID test to make sure he was negative before this procedure. And the day before, on Sunday, he lost his taste. He had no other symptoms. And prior to that, on, I guess, 4 or 5 days earlier, he did notice he had a fever of like 99.5. So not even considered a low-grade fever. It was around for like an hour and a half or 2 hours, then it was gone. So he told the nurse on Monday, and she said, well, you're probably going to test positive, but you do appear to be on the backside of this already. What are you doing? Because your body obviously fought it off pretty easily. Because we wouldn't even recognize that 99.5 would be any indicator to be concerned with, right? Because it usually has to be 100 or higher. Obviously, the loss of taste was the big one, right? And he said, well, I'm taking Immunodefense 4X that has vitamin D in it, quercetin and Epicor, and I'm taking a multivitamin that has zinc. And she said, you're doing all the right things. All of those things make a difference, she said. We tell our patients all the time after they come in and they're sick or whatnot, vitamin D is huge. Zinc's big. All of these make a difference. And she did go on to say, obviously we know other factors like the blood type and, other comorbidities like I talked about earlier can influence whether you have mild symptoms or severe symptoms. But even for those people, she said if they were to take adequate levels of vitamin D and their vitamin D level was adequate, they would have less symptoms. So we have doctors and nurses on what I would call that micro level, right? Telling all their patients when they're coming in. But the problem is they're coming in sick already, right? Or most of them are. We need to get that information out ahead of that, right? If those doctors and nurses aren't going to be on the news, then we have to be able to spread that information some way else so that we can actually help people make informed decisions on this, right? And just add one more tool to their toolbox to fight this virus, right? Because some people have to go to work, right? Some people have to be around people every single day. So the more tools we can give them to decrease their risk of infection, the safer everyone's going to be at that point, right? I was going to talk about this here is this other study. So this came out in September, right? And it says vitamin D deficiency increases a person's risk for catching COVID-19 by 77% compared to those with sufficient levels of the nutrient. And this study was published in the JAMA network. So, among these, they found lacking that key vitamin D nutrient, 22% contracted COVID-19. Of the 60% of the subjects with adequate vitamin D levels, only 12% were infected. So there's prior evidence from multiple sources that vitamin D can enhance both innate and adaptive immunity, according to Dr. David Meltzer, who's a professor of medicine at the University of Chicago. And what innate immunity is kind of like your body's first layer of defense. It's your natural immune system to actually shut the door right there at the access point, right, and block viruses. Where your adaptive immunity is more of how the body adjusts to a virus once it's in the body, once it maybe starts replicating. there's things called T cells and NK killer cells that now go out and try to destroy that virus, right? And that's where your adaptive immunity is. It's essentially your second layer of defense. So if it gets past that first innate layer, you have your second layer to try and protect you. They also noted that vitamin D may also prevent excess inflammation, and that's part of the challenge in managing severe COVID-19, according to Meltzer. So again, give yourself a fighting chance, right? If you wear a mask because you believe it helps, then try to learn as much as you can about the nutrients you can consume, right? Like vitamin D, like zinc, like Epicor, like quercetin, and build that defense system, right? Because again, if you think this helps to some extent, well, vitamin D helps to some extent. So why not make your fortress even stronger? Again, giving yourself that fighting chance. And, I was talking about that post I made the other day that, where some people said I was ignorant, some people liked it and, agreed that, yeah, something seems weird about why are we not talking about this type of information, right? And like I said, the emergency use authorization definition is if there is other alternative methods of treatment, then something cannot be approved for emergency use, right? So we've obviously got this vaccine through in record time, and they're using this emergency use authorization declaration, right? So my question was, so if we were to talk about how vitamin D may help and that there's enough studies to show that, consistently maybe it's 20% effective, right? Does that mean that they cannot, by law, provide emergency use, right? Obviously, we've seen laws changed over the last 9 months, so I don't know why they couldn't just change the law. But that was my question, right? And so I found this information on the British Medical Journal, and they were just rated the top 4 journals for impact in regards to studies and information, right? So they're one of the top journals out there in the world. They're very well respected. And this is what they wrote. Since late January 2020, a loose group have requested major clinical studies of sufficient power, including in care homes and hospitals. However, high-level drive and funding has been lacking, exacerbated by the Wellcome Gates Accelerator exclusion from the funding of vitamin D. Consequently, research establishments excluded vitamin D trials, focusing instead on repurposing drugs and new drugs, including in care home settings or nursing homes. The vitamin D studies would actually reduce the study patient pool, and further successful vitamin D outcomes may reduce funding for long-shot studies. So if they start trying to do research on vitamin D, they believe that, these studies wouldn't get funded for a vaccine, essentially what they're saying, right? And here's why. Vitamin D is not a patentable product. It's produced by evolution, right? It's natural. So us as humans can't take credit for it. We can't design it. We can't approve it in regards to, hey, we figured this out. There's no real financial driver behind it, right? Because they cannot lock it down from a drug or vaccine standpoint, meaning it can't be a prescription only, right? It's natural. I mean, we get it from the sunlight, So that was big, right? And then what they go on to say is, overall, if the depth of information and number of studies on vitamin D consistently pointing in the same direction, which so far indicates, the studies that have been coming out are indicating that all of it's pointing in the same direction. If it was related to a new COVID-19 drug with minimal side effects, it would have been front page news. Additional clinical research would have been prioritized with determination, and vitamin D by now licensed as a standard treatment protocol. So that's being published even by the British Medical Journal, right? In regards to why we're not talking about vitamin D. And it makes complete sense. If you cannot, from a pharmaceutical company, make money off of it, then I'm not going to study it, right? And here's another interesting fact. CDC and its members are part owner of over 50 patents related to vaccines. Did you know that? I actually just figured it out while I was researching some stuff earlier today. They make billions each year from these patents. So they also get funding from the pharmaceutical companies to do research, right, on drugs that eventually that pharmaceutical company is going to come out with. So when the CDC goes on the news and says, all we have is this mask, everyone needs to wear a mask. Well, it's probably because they physically can't talk about it. They're going to lose out on billions of dollars. And there was a drug pulled in 1999 because it deemed unsafe. It had only been out for like a year or 8 months or something. And they come to find out half of the board members that voted to approve that drug had a vested financial interest in it succeeding, meaning that they were getting money for it. So it's sad to think that we're told to trust the CDC, but there's board members and there's employees and their staff that literally have a financial interest in the vaccine world. So take it with a grain of salt, but to me that kind of puts a little less trust in who we're supposed to be trusting and respecting and so forth, and it also makes sense as to why we aren't hearing about vitamin D and zinc in major news streams and these appointed medical experts that are on the news every single night, because in my opinion there's something else behind that. My thinking is, if they were to come out and say vitamin D is such and such effective, whatever that percent is, right, and that everyone should be taking it, they wouldn't be able to get emergency use authorization for this vaccine, which means it would have to go through the normal channels, and it would probably take 3 to 4 years, right? Yes, more people would die, right? But we also don't know the outcome of how many people would survive if we actually started just talking about the vitamin D now as well, right? So, and not to mention, we've changed so many laws in the last 8 or 9 months because of something we didn't know was coming, right? And we had to adapt. Why can't we still adapt and just push something through the emergency use? Like, I don't know that people would have a problem with that, to be honest with you, especially since most people don't even know it existed. So that, I think, paints a good picture as to why mainstream media is not talking about vitamin D as much as they could be. So, again, none of this research is saying that vitamin D is the cure, but what it is indicating is that it may help significantly reduce the number of symptoms, infection rates, and the severity of those symptoms. The fact is that if we were told to bring our vitamin D levels up to a normal range, maybe this is nothing more than a flu-type virus. Again, we don't know until we go out and try to do it, right? So again, present the information, share it, share this video, and let people know that there's another option out there to help strengthen their defenses so that they have a greater chance of fighting off this virus, right? We know the vaccine is here. It's far from being dispersed to general public, right? I mean, most healthy general population, we're not going to see this vaccine until late May or something like that is what they're projecting, right? So we have another 4 months that we have to get through in regards to building up our immune system and our defenses so that we can decrease our exposure, decrease our viral load, and so forth, right? And this quote I saw from actually our local health official, Dr. Alex Garza in St. Louis here. He said 40% of people infected with the coronavirus do not show symptoms. Staff can transmit the virus into facilities unknowingly despite frequent testing. This is even more reason why, and again, staff are wearing this, right? But they're still supposedly transmitting it. This is even another reason why you need to put another tool in your toolbox, and that's vitamin D. Because again, with 40% of the population supposedly deficient in vitamin D, and all this data showing that more of the severe cases and deaths are because of, or that correlation is that vitamin D was low every time, and that those that seem to not have this same amount of health trouble did not have low vitamin D levels, means we should be talking about this. And he says one other thing, and this is probably the only thing I've ever agreed with in regards to what he has said in the last 8 months. He says, policymakers are making choices and individuals are making choices that impact who survives and who dies. And he is correct. Our policymakers are making a decision to not talk about vitamin D, and it is potentially impacting those who survive and those who die. Just like individuals making decisions, right? But if we don't have the information, we can't make the best informed decision as an individual, right? So to me, it starts with the policymakers. They are impacting who survives and dies. And by holding back some of this information on different nutrients is not helping. Because if the individuals have more information, they could be doing more to impact who survives and who dies, right? Because again, it's not just wearing a mask. It's not just social isolating, because some people can't do that. We have to have other tools, and they're out there, but people need to know about it. So hopefully you share this. Hopefully you like this stuff, and we can get that information out. Because obviously we still have to keep ourselves safe for a lot longer now. My suggestion is this: take 1,000 to 3,000 IUs of vitamin 3 daily. And if you can get your blood work done to measure your vitamin D levels, that would be ideal, because that way you truly know, am I deficient or am I not? Because if you're deficient, then you can work with your doctor on how many IUs do I truly need to get that up as fast as possible. We know that the tolerable upper limit is 4,000 IUs of vitamin D3 daily. So, anywhere from 1 to 3,000 is perfectly fine. You're probably not going to get above the normal range, which is anywhere from like 25 to 50 nanograms per milliliter is the normal vitamin D range. Some medical experts are suggesting to be in the 50 to 80 nanogram range to just give yourself a bigger chance or a better chance of fighting off infection rates. But if 40% of us are deficient, then we all need to be taking more vitamin D than what we're currently doing right now, right? And again, the best way to do it is get your blood work done so you know truly where you're at. And then if you're deficient, work with your doctor on how many IUs of vitamin D3 do you need to take to get that up as quick as possible, right? And, again, as you know, I'm starting to do these videos because I'm just frustrated with the whole process of not presenting the facts. And we obviously know a lot of people are all mask, anti-mask, all vaccine, no vaccine, for obviously different reasons, right? But they're also getting that information out there. So, for people to make that decision. So now we need to get the information out about different nutrients, right? So like today is about vitamin D. I'll talk in a few days about, I don't know what I'll talk about next. It'll either be zinc or Epicor, but we'll go through different nutrients. So again, that you have information in front of you so that you can make what you feel is the best decision for your health. And with that being said, what I'm going to do is we do have an immune system formula. We came out with it in June or July. Started making it in June. We got it out to the public in July. And it was to give people that fighting chance. And it's nutrients that I have been taking for years separately, but I decided to make it into one formula so that others could take advantage of it, especially since at that time it was really hard to find these certain nutrients, right? Especially the ones that are supported by science and whatnot. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to set aside 1,000 bottles that people can actually buy a bottle at our manufacturer cost. So we're not making any money from it. It's not a subscription program or anything like that. You're not going to get roped into some monthly thing, right? But I want to be able to give back for those that do want to improve their immune system. They want to have that fighting chance, right? And it contains vitamin D, it contains Epicor, it contains quercetin. Like I said, I'll talk about those other nutrients in future videos, but it's just something that I wanted to do as a registered dietitian, as a human being that, can help other people, because it all makes a difference. Like that nurse that told my friend, all of those things make a difference. When he told her that he took the immunodefense and that he has a multivitamin with zinc in it, it all helps. So if you want to go to www.immunodefenseoffer.com, you can see that you can actually get one bottle at our manufacturer cost. And again, there's no subscriptions, no catches, no, hey, I can't cancel this thing, keeps showing up every month type of thing that everyone's scared of. Nothing like that. It's just a way for me to be able to give back to you and the community so that they can actually strengthen that immune system. I mean, again, even if by chance that United States study that reduced infection rate by 54% can be replicated, all I think about is, how could that affect our hospitals? what would our death rate look like? I mean, it would be astronomical. So please share this information, because I truly believe if we can reduce that 40% vitamin D deficiency rate amongst, the US population, you're going to see death rates go down. You're going to see infection rates go down. You're going to be able to see people live their life more. Businesses not have to close, right? People lose their jobs. So it's not just a matter of people not getting sick. It's our entire livelihood at this point. So hopefully you like this information. And again, I'm going to be coming out with some more videos here on different nutrients so that, again, you can make that informed decision. But feel free to go to immunodefenseoffer.com and pick up your bottle at our manufacturer cost so that you can start building one more tool into your toolbox and give yourself that fighting chance. So I'm going to try to scan for comments one more time here. And of course, it is not showing anything. So, oh, you know what? I do have one comment over here. Jen's asking, doesn't the Immunodefense 4X have zinc in it? That is one nutrient it does not have in it. We focused more because, again, we tried to keep the cost down. As you're seeing now, I mean, when you go to the immunodefenseoffer.com page, you're going to see it's not like it's a $3 formula, unfortunately. It's, Epicor, vitamin D, quercetin, they're not cheap ingredients. So, but they work, right? The science supports them. So we left zinc out primarily for a few reasons. One, because of the cost of trying to just not make this formula too expensive so that people can afford it. And two, a lot of multivitamins actually have zinc in it. So, you only have to probably take about 15 to maybe 30 milligrams per day as a maintenance level. If you were to actually get sick with COVID, I would suggest you bump that up some. But a lot of multivitamins have 15 milligrams in them. So, that's probably your baseline. And, then we get into, do I not take this vitamin? Do I take this? And we didn't want to overcomplicate it for people. So that's why we did not include zinc in there. So, seeing if there's any other comments here. Does not look like it. So again, I hope you like this information. I'm going to be coming out with some more information. Again, if you like it, please share it. Let's try to get the message out about vitamin D, because we're obviously not getting it through mainstream media, and we are not being informed so that we can make the best decision for ourselves. So have a good night, and I will see everyone on the next video.